I was a grinder. I would do whatever it took at the cost of anyone around me to become what I thought was successful. You know, getting money and passive income and going beyond anything I'd ever dreamed in business and realizing this doesn't feel the way I thought it would feel. You know, I have it all. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got everything and then some. And yet deep inside, I don't feel like I thought it would feel.
Welcome back to the Hard But Worth It podcast. Today, Kirk, we have a friend of ours named Chris Lamm, and not only a friend, but a leader in our community, someone who's serving families as a mortgage banker. I think the last time we talked, you had over 5,000 deals closed, but I think since then it's probably counting.
It's somewhere around there.
Yeah, and billions, or at least 1 billion.
Yeah, one.
1 billion.
Yeah.
But man, we got Chris here, and just the joy of hanging with someone who's here local in our area, making the world a better place, you know, showing up. I think now you're not just a mortgage banker who in your own right has established some credibility and success, but you're now coaching in that space. Mm-hmm. And then you also have this new podcast called Money Hole, right? Good That's money. Right. Good people, or good people, good money.
Yep.
And so you're just kind of got your fingers in all kinds of things. And then I know when you're not working, you're out hunting, killing things, you're doing dangerous things.
Trying to.
Out in the woods.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about currently, just drop in right now. What are you doing today? If we're following you around the camera, what's a day in the life of Chris look like?
Well, the first thing is I have 3 little kids, so there's not as much hunting going on right now. Except
How old are they? What age ranges?
1.5, 6, and 7.
Oh, you're in the thick of it, as they say.
So we're very busy with the kids, and we've had a beautiful summer here, as you guys know. So the mornings for walks before work have been great. So a lot of family time. We have, we're trying to help my kids have structure during the summer and go on bike rides and make sure we spend time with them. And then, the mortgage business right now is in a very interesting place. With inflation, we've got higher interest rates. The prices did not go down like everyone thought they would. And so, right now we're definitely helping people buy homes, but it's a very different conversation than it was 2 years ago. And so, just trying to coach our clients on making good decisions for their family and not being in fear, but also not, jumping into a bad situation. And then helping our loan officers and the guys that I coach through a group called The Core, stay engaged with their business and not get depressed and just, I had a guy ask me today, he's like, how do you stay motivated? And I was like, well, I don't. I'm pretty tired most of the time.
Sure.
I said, but the reality is if you want to change the way you think, you got to take action. And you're not going to think your way into being motivated. You're going to have to take actions. Your actions are going to create new results. Your new results are going to create better emotions, and then it's going to reinforce a different belief. And so that's really the Monday through Sunday life right now.
Right on.
Hopefully a little hunting this fall.
So I like to ask sometimes, and I think this would be fun. If you were an animal, like what would you be?
Probably a lion. It's the first thing that comes to mind, yeah.
Why?
King of the jungle.
What's the jungle?
I don't know, but...
But you're the king of it.
I'm the king of it, yeah.
That's awesome.
I just think they're awesome
I'm
animals.
the king. I'm the king.
I know. We have different jungles. We have different jungles? Exactly. We have different jungles.
Yeah.
If you could take us back, we often are telling the stories of the development of a leader.
Yep.
And you have developed, you are a leader in your community, you're doing all kinds of things that qualify in that respect. But if you were to take us back to the beginning of that journey, who would you say you were then?
I was, probably drifting. One of the sayings we use in our group is the stages of going from drifting to driven and then to being directed. And so for me, when I think about where I was a grinder. I would do whatever it took at the cost of anyone around me to become what I thought was successful. And I worked really, really hard. And, it's like everything, it was probably rooted in a lot of insecurities and different things from my childhood. But I was I worked really hard and I was super proud of that. And I was getting results from it. But at some point, I realized these aren't really the results that I wanted, and they're not benefiting the people around me.
What kind of results were they?
Well, I was making money.
Okay, so you're being successful financially.
From the world
So when you say
standards,
those weren't the results you wanted, or something was wrong, what was wrong with making money?
Well, there wasn't anything wrong with making money, but I just think that I had an incomplete vision. And I wasn't able to see past that. You know, it was very much around the material possessions and the prestige and the accomplishment and, you know, having my name at the top of the charts and the different things in my industry. And so there was not a lot of depth to it. And again, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. So many people start there and it definitely drives them. But at some point, you know, I hit walls and I found myself not happy and realizing that you get there and you're like, now what?
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about that all the time. We talked about it last week, in fact. And I think that's where the driven thing hopefully goes into more of being directed. And for me, that, you know, today that's different. I have coaches and mentors and people that I ask.
So we go
a lot of
back to
questions.
the beginning again, and you're using this idea of drifting.
Yep.
Why were you drifting? What created the ecosystem or environment in which that felt like the right thing to be doing?
I think that what happens for a lot of guys I know who are high-level business leaders, even if they're married men and, you know, they have faith and, you know, anyone that knows them would say that's a great man. We work so hard and we put so much energy into our careers for all the reasons that I said and a million more, that we don't realize the toll that it's taking on our soul and on our just on our mind and on our bodies. And, you know, when you're tired and when you're burned out and when you know, when all of your success is coming from this one area of life that you only can control so much of it, I just think that you end up drifting in all the other areas of life.
Got it. So you were driven in one area.
I was driven in one area.
But drifting kind of
I was drifting everywhere else, yeah. I could answer
sense.
that a little shorter, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I had to do it in a roundabout way.
That's how we think. That's how this works,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so something woke you up to that idea along the way. I'm guessing that because the way you're talking about this, like it's past tense, and then along the way, something woke you up. It's often a moment or a challenge or a thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what that was?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a few things. One of the things that comes to mind is when early in my life or early in my marriage, I had cancer. And, you know, everyone asks about cancer. What was that like? Were you scared? I wasn't scared. I was pissed off because I had plans. You know, I was getting married and I had this vision of what I wanted and what I wanted our life to look like. And you know, getting that information was a big inconvenience to me.
So it was bad cancer. This wasn't like
it was stage 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was definitely bad cancer. It spread through all my throughout my body. And so, and I was, you know, I was worried that I didn't know what was going to happen. So that was a disruptor for me. And at the same time, I was newly married and we didn't have a whole lot of money at the time. We owned a house. We had a little bit of reserves, but you know, when you're self-employed, you still have to work. You don't have the options of I did not have disability available to me.
Right.
So I'm in the chemo ward getting pumped full of chemo and I'm on my laptop, you know, working with clients trying to keep my business going. Yeah. And it worked for a while, but at a certain point, a lot of the people that were referring me, they stopped referring to me.
Sure.
And it wasn't because I wasn't calling people back, because they probably they didn't know if I was going to live.
Right.
You know, so I didn't blame them for it. But that was a big disruptor for me. And what that did for me is it made me realize how quick things can change in your life, and that you never know what's coming around the corner. And I wanted to just be in a little bit of a better place, because now I had someone else depending on me. It was always me before, and I could get through anything, but I needed to make sure that I could take care of my wife.
So that sounds like an incredibly low spot.
It was pretty low.
How did that play out? What did that feel like?
Being
That low. Still, I mean, you're describing carrying the weight of a business, of providing, of this new marriage. I mean, those are all high. Those are not low stakes things.
Yeah.
While on chemo, holding your potential mortality in your hand.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm painting too dark a picture. It seems
No, you're not. But the
like
interesting,
the highest of stakes.
the interesting thing is when you take chemotherapy, it not only kills the bad cells in your body, but it crushes your dopamine, your serotonin, and everything that makes you feel like life is worth living. And so for me, I don't remember feeling a lot of anything. I just remember committing to doing this for my wife and knowing I needed to take care of her. And it was almost as if I just started walking up this mountain that I never knew when the climb would stop. And I just kind of just started going. And so I wasn't sad. Once I got into it, I wasn't sad. I wasn't mad. I wasn't scared.
Interesting.
I just did what had to be done.
Yeah. That's often how a lot of people describe the moments of suffering in their life. You look at it from the outside and you're like, how in the world did you do that? But when you're in the middle of it, people say, I didn't have a choice. And of course they did. Yep. You can lay down and engage it poorly.
Yep.
But there was something, it's like you just do.
I think what's interesting too that I'm picking up on, and maybe this was happening or maybe it wasn't, but at your age, you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so the things that I heard you say you were counting as loss wouldn't be what I would have thought you would have been assuming would have been the loss of your life, the loss of loved ones. But you were in a space where the loss of your job or the loss of your planned career, the life you were building was more of the disruption and pissed off than anything. And I go, what's that about? Like when we're at certain levels of our maturity in life or our growth in life, I think what we count as loss can be reflected by that stage or that maturity age, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the Chris today going through that same struggle would count other things as loss rather than what was counted as loss back then, if that makes sense. Has that changed?
Yeah, that's it. I've never thought about that. I'm thinking about it now. I definitely would be affected having children. That definitely would change things dramatically for me. I do think that I love what I'm doing in my life right now. It's anything but easy. But if something like that happened and it took me away from the things that I'm doing, there would definitely be a moment of like, this is not, I would have to adjust to that. And hopefully I would land somewhere where I would try to see the divine in it all and just know that there's a plan that's bigger than what I have. And most of the times in my life, what I thought was a really bad thing ended up working for me and not against me, including cancer.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, but hopefully I don't have to find that out.
No, exactly.
One of the things
but that's a great question. Yeah. That's a really good question.
Well, no, I was just thinking like you and I talk about these levels of motivations, these levels we kind of enter into. And we know early on, it's the first thing are just biological drives, these things that we're born with to breathe, to eat, But once those are met, I think we know we can start reaching for some of the more, we'd call those extrinsic motivations, but, trying to build a life, what does the world say a man or a family or a job life looks like. And so we start measuring some of our motives by external, not bad, but they're not always the most integrated. But once those are kind of met, we realize then, now that didn't quite satisfy. And we can maybe reach for those deeper intrinsic, which is where we believe the best life begins to be lived, right? Yeah. We're actually liberated to live the things. But I wonder if, too, there's a thought there in what we might count as suffering and loss based on where we're at in the journey, too. I imagine there is, because I think of my life and what I valued at that stage would also be connected to what I value as a loss.
Yeah. The idea of suffering is, we often equate it to something like, significant pain or something like that. But emotional pain is just as significant. And so really what we're talking about, I think when we talk about suffering, is the loss of control.
Yeah.
which we probably didn't have anyway. So there's an illusion of control
True.
going on there.
Yep.
And so when you're sitting at a stoplight and there's no traffic around, that is a mini suffering, because you are surrendering yourself to this thing outside of you and saying, for whatever reason, I agree to be controlled by this little light.
Yep.
Right? Because we agree collectively that that's a better way to live.
Yep.
Right? So it's a little minor suffering, but in the same way, you drop down in what we would call great suffering, and that sounds a lot like what you experienced there. And it's a massive transition from, I thought I had my life planned out. I thought I was in control. I have these mechanisms that will allow me to drive into that future. Right?
Yep.
And they're clicking into place.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, quite suddenly, it sounds like, smash.
Yeah.
And you're left with, I'm not in control of it. Am I in control of anything? And it's a great suffering like that. And we say that suffering like that is one of the greatest teachers in life.
Oh man.
Okay, cool. And it will either the phrase is, it'll make you or break you.
Yep.
And I always modify that. I'm saying, no. It breaks you. That's not in question.
Yep.
It's, will it make you? And what will it make you becomes the question. Right. So I'm curious if this was an event, and you're nodding as though it was.
Yeah.
It was a breaking, no doubt. But who did you become, or how did it shift you?
Yeah, and I think it really goes back to your question, because I've never thought that, but I actually do think, if something were to happen like that again, I would be in a much better space, because I do know, in a way that I don't think anyone would know unless they went through something like that, that you can plan for the future, but you really need to live for today, and so that is definitely something I got out of that. I also realized that I have it's really done something for my faith. There definitely was some moments there where I didn't know what was going to happen, and so the idea of dying, which I think is a fear that a lot of people deal with, it doesn't. I don't really have that fear, and I think living is important, especially when you have kids, and I had a cancer scare about a year ago, and I had to kind of go through some of this again. It wasn't anything, thankfully, but I was also extremely driven. I remember sitting in the doctor's office when I got my clean bill of health, and he was going through my charts, and I had just gone through 6 months of chemo, and many of the people that were sitting in the room with me died. And he looked at me and he said, well, most people don't make it out of here, and you're going to make it. And he said, so if I were you, I would leave this place and never look back. And I took what he said as the best advice ever. Now, 15 years later, I will say that wasn't the best advice, because I completely shut it off and didn't even process so much of what had happened, and went full steam ahead back into my plans. And it wasn't till a little bit later that I had to start processing.
Had to look back.
I had to look back.
To integrate.
I
right?
did.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
What caused that?
I think what caused that for me would have been achieving financial success, getting money and passive income, and it's going beyond anything I'd ever dreamed in business, and realizing this doesn't feel the way I thought it would feel. And, I have it all. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got everything and then some. And yet deep inside, I don't feel like I thought it would feel. I don't have a lot of peace. I don't feel like I'm contributing. I don't feel like I'm giving my heart to the world around me. And, because before all of this, I thought I was going to be a missionary, and I was going on mission trips and, doing some things. I shared some of those with you that they've made me feel so alive. And I would say at this point, I felt the opposite of that. And I think it was around that time that I realized, man, this whole idea of generosity and leadership and all these things, like, they can't just be something we say we do and we put on our website. Like, it has to be something that becomes a part of who I am, because this life is pretty empty, and my wife doesn't really need any of this. She never did. My kids
You mean the life
don't.
you were living at that point was pretty empty? So you
Yeah.
had all the things.
Yeah, and I was even doing a lot of good things. I mean, I'm still helping people get sober. I'm still, being generous. But the truth is, my priorities were out of whack. And I had to get to this place where I realized, man, I really need to figure this out. And me being kind of an addictive personality, I oftentimes think in this black or white mindset, like it's all or nothing. Like I just have to quit everything and sell everything and go be like, and I've really struggled over the years to learn how to realize, no, it's like both and it's not, it doesn't have to be black and white. Because oftentimes, and this has been my truth, when it's more of an internal surrender. And really digging deep and figuring out like what is it that you really need to prioritize, and it's tweaking my schedule to give time to these things and being okay with whatever happens with letting go of the things that I think I need to hold on to. And then as I do that, I start feeling better, number one, because I'm working out, I'm getting counseling, I'm talking with a friend about what's going on here instead of just biting down and moving forward. But on the other side of that, you start showing up in your business with your referral partners and your team and your counterparts in a way that you didn't show up before. And it's incredible how much more magnetic you become.
Isn't it?
And from my experience was my income went up, not down. But in my mind, I thought I was prepared to lose it all, to get my soul back and to feel like I was
and it's not
living
mutually
a purpose.
exclusive.
Totally.
It feels like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're starting to talk about, the things that you had gone after a bunch of stuff, those external things that we often do early on.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not wrong. They're all fine. But when
Right.
you try to use those to fill the meaning structure of your life, they're empty. They're hollow.
Yep.
And the journey to get there was hard.
Yep.
And then we discover wasn't exactly worth it. And it sounds like you're beginning to describe a new sense of what makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And how would you describe that at this point on this side of that journey?
Yeah, well, in our coaching group, we use some similar language to what you're talking about. We talk about, and this is talking about us, but it's talking about people. Most people, they live in survival mode, and if they can get out of that, what motivates them, we would just simplify what you say and call it stuff.
Yeah.
The material.
Yeah.
And then if you get to where I've gotten, and many people have, you realize, man, this doesn't really satisfy either. I have to store it, insure it, take care of it, and it's taking my time from me. And you have to work harder to debt service those things because most people don't have the cash just to go buy it. And so then, it's like, well, I don't want to live like this. I would like to have my time back. The things I enjoy in life more than anything else are being on the ground playing with my kids, sitting around with a couple guys like you and having a deep conversation and belly laughing. And those things don't really take a lot of money. And so how do I get my time back? Well, that becomes for me the motivation to become financially independent, free, whatever language you want to use, but basically where you just don't have to survive on, you're not dependent on your job. And then the last one, we call it legacy. And I know that word gets thrown out there a lot, but for me, that word really means that you're trying to help other people learn from the mistakes you've made and the wins you've made. You're sharing what you have with them. Yeah. And so that could be, for me, I'm sober 20 years next Friday. I go into juvenile hall. I talk to a lot of people that struggle with addiction and try to help them understand, the root of it and become emotionally healthy. I'm involved in Brave Co with Jason Valentin. I have 3 adopted kids. I swore to the state of California, Florida, that I was going to take care of them and nurture them emotionally. And, early on in my marriage, I did not take great care of my wife's heart because I didn't even know how to take care of mine. So now I'm on this journey of really trying to learn to connect with the people around me and listen to what's really going on. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but in a roundabout way, that's where it's at today.
Yeah, I think you're starting to circle the thing, right? You're talking very clearly about it's not about stuff. It's about people, connection and relationship, but it's also this idea of being generous with more than money.
Way more than money.
I think what you're saying is be generous with yourself.
Yes.
Now I'm going to read into it maybe a little too far, but I think you said that you had to get to know yourself first, love yourself before you can be generous with yourself.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were to sort of capsulate that into what brings meaning to Chris today, or where does purpose reside for you today? How would you play with that idea?
I went on a trip to a shooting school in Wyoming 2 years ago with a group of leaders and pastors and business guys. And I've been on a lot of men's retreats in my life, and they're okay. But I wanted to go and hang out with these guys. Well, what I found was at this moment where I was, the needs that I had and the needs these guys had, it was one of the most powerful experiences I ever had. And these guys all have become some of my closest friends in the season I'm in right now. And so when you ask what is meaning, like spending time with people who are going after the same things in life, that is one of the most meaningful things for me.
What are you going after?
Well, we're going after being wholehearted men.
And what does that mean?
That means, that's a great question.
What does it mean for you?
What it means for me is that I'm constantly being reminded and aware of the unique value that I bring this earth, my kids, my wife. I don't always know what that is, but I'm learning it a little bit more here and there. And one of the freedoms in that is there is no more comparison with anybody. And what I found is when you have that type of self-esteem and self-awareness, you are so much more magnetic to other people because it isn't common for someone to be that comfortable with who they are. And I just think that people that get to that place, this is my experience and what I'm seeing with other people, that's when they really become dangerous.
So you're making me think of Psalm 51:6. This is a verse that I read in the Bible the other day as I was just spending time reading the Bible, kind of normal process for me. And in this passage, this psalm is written. It's like a poem that King David wrote as a poem of sorrow for a really big bad thing that he did, right?
His low point, right?
Yeah, his low point.
Yeah.
And Nathan confronts him, his friend, and says, dude, bro, you blew it. So here he laments and has this psalm. Well, in verse 6, I'm reading it, and there's this phrase where it says, and you, and so what David's saying is basically you to God. He says, and you desire honesty in the womb, teaching me wisdom even from there.
Yeah.
And so this idea of wholehearted, if you look at the word womb, it actually means heart. In fact, if you read other translations, you might even come across you desire honesty in the inner place or in the heart. And I know in this passage, like David has made a big mistake, and I get that. And so that text serves to support that context. However, I wonder if in that, and this is part of my process in just kind of thinking through this verse, I wonder if part of the honesty is us learning to be open to our heart, the deepest things in our heart that have been placed in us even in the womb. It's this idea that we kind of sit here and say we believe we were formed in our mother's womb. And there are unique things. That's why Kirk asked you that question, so what does that mean for you? And if we can be honest, deep to that place of what has been put in me, maybe even from birth.
Yeah.
These deep passions. Why am I here on this earth? What's my mark? How am I going to show up and make the world a better place? If I can learn to play to that, there's actually wisdom that we can learn in that place in our life. And I wonder if some of us aren't really ready to get there until we've lived a little bit of life where we're closed to that and we keep it kind of suppressed beneath the surface. But we know there's these things lingering.
Yeah.
And if we just let them loose, I wonder if we start to catch kind of the same spirit of living a wholehearted life. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? And when we can show up that way, I think we're being the most honest, the most fulfilled,
Yeah.
and, probably doing some of our best work.
I think so too. And I think that honesty for me is so much more important than perfection. And I feel like so many people are afraid of going all in on anything in their life because they're so afraid of failing. And I have failed so much in my life. I've made some really bad decisions, and I don't regret any of it because that I would not have gotten to where I'm at today if I wouldn't have walked through all those things. And I think that that's something I really try to help people with is like, you don't have to have it figured out, but man, just go. For me, like I bumped my head against the wall with a lot of things in my life to get to this point. But if I wouldn't have taken the chance, I would have just sat back and just kind of followed the system, for lack of better terms.
Sure.
I would have missed out on so much.
Yeah. We do this thing, and this idea of we guide clients through the what do you want question, or where are you going, and it really is the want question, and whether you go through a formal coaching course or not everyone arrives to that place in their life for whatever reason. They never get there.
To where they can answer that question.
To where they can really
level.
answer that question at that level. But talk to us about some of that process a little bit.
We like to say that the what do you want question is the second hardest question in the world. When answered powerfully, when answered really, really well, it's a deep act of vulnerability to reveal and expose something that has been in you for a very long time. It's tried to get out in all these sideways. It's leaked out in ways that are even bad. Some of our worst moments were us chasing what do we want, and then we shut it down.
That
We're
makes
like,
total sense,
right? I can't do that.
Yep.
Or someone says, we hear this, stop doing that from the surrounding world because we're hurting people.
Yep.
And what we hear is stop being you, and we're like, fair enough, because it hurts people.
Yep.
And so we stop.
Yep.
But at some point, and I would say it takes time. There's no way this doesn't take time, decades sometimes, to get to a spot that you're describing, that moment when you're like, okay, I've succeeded by some standards. I got what I wanted, but it isn't actually what I want.
Yeah.
And now I can begin to play with that idea.
Yep.
And it's this ancient language we're learning to speak. And a lot of us are trying to go after it externally. We're trying to go on this journey to go find it. And you don't find it. You awaken to it.
Yeah.
And it's always been there.
Yep.
But to reveal it to the world puts us in a position where now we have to take something that is so intrinsically valuable to us. An intrinsic value, right? Priceless. Without measuring. But we have to take it out and we have to do something with it.
Yep.
Which you can measure all of that. You can actually fail at it.
Yep.
And we have to get comfortable learning to fail at doing me, knowing I can never fail at being me.
Yeah.
Those sort of things.
Yep.
And so we keep this thing quiet inside and hope someday it'll happen, right? But there comes a day when it's like, no, today's the day. I'm going for it. This is what I want.
Decide it's your time. It's right now.
And it's a way of being in the world.
Yep.
And then you got to figure out what to do with it, right?
Yep.
And that's a whole different category. So the what do you want question, I think, is, we say this, you've heard us say it on this channel all the time. We say the only thing worse in life than not getting what you want is getting it.
Yep.
Because then two reasons. One, you have to figure out what it is again, second hardest question in the world. And you kind of have to come to grips with that didn't satisfy me.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think anything will ever satisfy me. And I still have to go after things I want. I think of that question also as being, it's a different version of the what are you all about question, right? It's just a different version of that question because you're revealing it in the future tense, but it's this way of coming into being with yourself and to loving yourself enough to risk doing something with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's the power move, or that's what I think thriving might look like.
Yeah.
We often talk about, this one gets tricky because attempting to live into your greatness might sound like becoming great at something.
Right.
Right. And it's the problem of language. We're using the word great to mean two very different things.
Yep.
And there are people who are truly the best in the world at something.
Yep.
But that's a pretty rare air.
It is.
But your greatness can be expressed, and you might not even be known. You might not even be famous.
Many aren't.
Almost everybody.
Yeah.
Because almost no one's actually famous.
Yep.
That's the nature of fame. There's only room for a few. So when you talk about going after this thing, this what do you want thing, and this, does that resonate with what you were trying to describe earlier? How would you say that in your words or in your way of thought?
I think it comes down to just, first of all, that awakening. Don't you think that that's always going to be happening for us? It's not like I was awakened. It's like I'm awakening, and
process.
It's ongoing. Because every week I'm letting go of old ideas and so that I can grab new ones. Yep. I think for a lot of people that I run with and people that I know, they don't actually take the time to even think about what they want. And I think that's part of the problem is that people, and that's why I did the Money Hole podcast, and that's why I talk to people about money so much, because so much of people's lives is go to work, go home, feed the kids, and just like go to bed, and you live that lifestyle for 5 or 6 or 10 years. Like, it's no wonder that you become obese, that you get divorced, that you do drugs, that you do alcohol, and that you know what I mean. And so I think for the first thing is people need to take the time to start actually thinking about what they're thinking.
Yeah. Having thoughts about their thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. And when you do that, then you start thinking about what you want.
Yeah.
And I think it's totally okay. You got to be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, like this for me, like I came out of a church where I thought that you had to be poor to have God in your life. And so for me, I had visions of owning hunting farms and, you know, having a great house with a pool and going on great trips with my family. And there was this anchor pulling that down, making me feel like that was wrong.
Yeah, disallowed.
It was disallowed, right?
Yeah.
And now I did it anyways. And then when I got there, it wasn't really about they were right. It was more about, no, they were wrong, but there's more. Mm-hmm. And I want to know what the more is. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the more is right now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to find it, you know? And so I think exposing yourself to people, I mean, the world we live in now with podcasts and books, you don't necessarily have to have the people around you, but if you can find people that have what you want in life, whether they seem like they have more peace or joy or they have, you know, great relationship with their spouse, their kids, these are the things that are important to me. I think people that succeed in business is great, but I've seen a million people do that now, and I don't want anything from what I see in their life. Mm-hmm. They're completely out of balance. They're lying to themselves, and this is a way of telling them they have what it takes.
Right.
And what I have found is it takes much more courage and strength to go in here.
Yeah.
It does. And
that's a real man.
It's a journey that not everyone makes.
Nope.
And in today's culture with podcasts and, you know, so much information available, I think we've also allowed ourselves to subscribe to a bit of a synthetic version, which is I can live on your experience.
Yeah.
But we kind of say that in a weird way, like, you know, well,
simulacra.
let me, the best experience is, you know, someone else's mistakes and we just learn from them. But there's also a reservation I have now being 51 years old. And because of my love for my children, there's a part of me that wants to say, let me save you the pain mm-hmm. of making the journey. In a sense, what I'm doing is I'm taking away their courageous journey mm-hmm. if I intervene to teach them a lesson that I learned that they may never learn unless they take the courageous journey.
Yeah.
So I found my parenting is actually pulling back and going, I probably know where this road is going to lead them.
Yep.
And it's probably going to lead them to some pain.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the good on the other side of that pain
yeah.
is them learning more about their deep desire of what they want.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead them to becoming liberated sooner than if I try to get in the way. So I think what we're getting at too is there's a process, but really the best process is the individual has to take the journey.
Yeah.
And it is a courageous journey because it's a deep journey of the soul and the heart. And no one can really make that for us.
Mm-hmm. And I believe that he just described leadership pretty well.
Sum it up for us.
The truest form of leadership, I think, is parenting like that.
Right.
I've been thinking a lot of, you know, in my world, there's all these conversations about legacy wealth, leaving your kids an inheritance, and we use biblical terms, and it's ironic. I just updated my trust today. And she asked, like, how we want to do things. I said, for now, we're going to do that. But I have this thing I've been really thinking about. And I actually saw a quote recently. It said, the greatest legacy we leave our children is not money, it's education. And for me, it's really shifted from, I don't want to make their lives easier. I do not want to leave them something that will ruin their life or take away the battles that they need to fight.
Right.
The legacy I want to leave them is, number one, I want them to truly know they're loved and valued.
Yeah.
And I believe for me that comes in its purest form from knowing God. Mm-hmm. But number two, I want them to know how to manage well in this world, in this financial system, in this Western culture, and all the madness that's coming out of it. And so my focus is really shifting from leaving them anything to, while I have them, I need to try to focus on these two things. I think these are, I may change this, but today, like I'm feeling like these are the two most important things that I help them with. I think you were saying that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're actually doing some work right now looking to specifically target the financial professional, the financial industry. And one of the facts that we've arrived to, and it's not like it's a surprise, but it supports this idea. But a lot of financial professionals, whether you're a financial advisor, a financial wholesaler, maybe you're a mortgage banker, somewhere in that space of helping families secure their financial future, the motivation that got them into that profession is a deep intrinsic motivation. It's this deep desire to try to help other people thrive and succeed and flourish, or whatever that looks like. What's interesting is the current investor, so you and I as a consumer showing up with our advisor, recognizing that most of us are only motivated to a certain point of meeting that basic level of needs to live and comfort. Mm-hmm. And then every dollar above that is really has a big diminishing return. And so if we're showing up speaking to that consumer as if we're going to help them make the biggest portfolio of retirement to pass on to their children's children, we're not actually speaking the message of their heart, which is they don't care at a certain point. They don't care about all that money. Now, it's not that anyone's going to turn it down, but what we really need to speak to is, how are you going to show up in every photograph? Mm-hmm. How are you at this point going to show up at every event? Because that is what we want. We want to live life with our kid. That is the legacy we want to live, is showing up rather than just having a bank account full of money. I think that's what you're kind of wrestling with right now, maybe in a different way, but it's similar in that space of, it's not just about maybe the old school millions of dollars.
Yeah, the notions of retirement and legacy as it relates to inheritance are largely crafted, in my opinion, from an era of in the West where we were awakening the middle class to the probability that they were going to be able to retire. Like, the notion of retirement is only a few generations old.
True.
It's a brand new idea.
Yep.
And then it escalated really quick to where the golden years and all these different stuff. And so then we've given that a pretty good run. And it's not a bad thing. But now we know things like people are bored in their retirement.
Yeah. And they die.
And then they die. And what really, the place we find meaning in life is creating value for the benefit of others.
Yeah.
And so if you've worked your whole life doing something you hate, or maybe you're only mildly motivated by, or something like that, in order to make enough money so that you can finally do what you want, and what you think you want is to take care of yourself, that's all backwards.
Yep.
And I think we're on the other side of some learnings about what this whole retirement legacy thing is. I think so too. And we need to keep a hold of those words. The idea of retirement is still an interesting idea, and legacy still matters, but it's not in money necessarily.
No, it's more.
It's the balance thing again.
It's much bigger than that.
And I think we're trying to get the notions of how do we live our life now in our daily careers into how do we retire well. And like I think my favorite way to say is, let's all retire from have to and get to the get to. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean we stop working. And by work, all I mean is creating value for others.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Let's get to things that are even more meaningful, sometimes which include making money, and that's all fine. And instead of legacy, like this idea of, I want to leave a legacy. I'm like, dude, it's done. You will. There's no doubt you will. Mm-hmm. Whatever you do with your life will be your legacy.
Yeah, one way or the other.
One way or the other. Yeah. There is no legacy or legacy. And the way the financial mind or the money idea is, it's, I'm either going to leave them no inheritance or a massive inheritance, which will be my legacy. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, that's one. Yep. There's all kinds of legacies you can leave. And again, the idea of balancing things out.
Yeah.
The legacy I want to leave more than anything else. And one of my sons is sitting right over here, and I don't know if he knows this or not, is I want to teach him how to think.
Yeah.
Because the world that we're creating right now is changing so fast that we can't actually prepare people for careers, because the careers they're going to be working in 20 years haven't even been invented yet.
Right.
Because that was true 20 years ago.
Yes.
So I don't need to teach you a skill that will take care of you. I need to teach you how to think.
Thinking. Yep.
And how to engage the world. And then thinking to me is not head, heart differentials. It's being able to see. How good are you at being able to see what's going on around you? Both situational awareness, but also emotional awareness. Where's what's happening right now? What's actually happening? And how deep can you see what's actually happening? That's where influence comes from.
Yeah.
That's where impact comes from. And if
Yep.
you can do that, you can see trend adjustments. You can see change happening. You can stand. It's where I think resilience resides.
Yeah.
Like I got hit twice this week by some pretty big emotions that were handed to me as though they were mine. And it took me a minute to be resilient enough to be able to go, wait a minute, those aren't mine, right? Nope. But that took seeing, which took thinking, which took a community of people. So to sum all that up, the legacy, I think we get to think through legacy in a more balanced and whole way. And I honestly don't care if I leave my kids any money. It doesn't motivate me. I'm not interested in that because that hasn't been my life purpose to make it for myself. It's a fine idea. And I know people who are deeply committed to that process of leaving inheritance. And that can be a beautiful thing. But if I was to rant even louder, it'd be like, why is it always all about money?
Yeah.
Why is that the definition of legacy? I think it's about showing up as the best version of yourself and then doing that for the benefit of others. And if you can figure out what that version is and then consistently drive to figure out how to show up as a better version of that, and if that shows up in money, awesome. But what are the other ways that could possibly show up? There's tons of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like your story about being in Africa and watching a bunch of kids playing soccer.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with money.
Nope. It had nothing to do with money.
Right.
Now that you're aware that you're learning, right? It's a
Well
lifelong
said.
learner because
Yeah.
it is evolving.
Yes.
But you now have awareness to this process. I wonder if that now shows up as a leadership style in your office. So like when my wife and I show up in your office across the desk and we're looking at buying a property, do you now lead with another dimension
Oh, yeah.
of insight because you're aware that this is important?
Yes.
And does that come across your desk to the clients? And if so, I'm like, how does that look? You know, some of us listening in, it's like, okay, like we hear this, but then what does that look like in our life?
Yeah. Well, I think now, I know that I have a lot more to give you than a mortgage. So the first question I ask people usually is, tell me your story. Now, that's a really good question to ask everyone for so many reasons, right?
Totally.
I mean, number one, in sales, if we just limit it to being in sales, if you just shut your mouth and listen, you're going to hear a lot of important information about what that person wants and needs and what the objections might be, right? You're going to see who talks first and leans forward to know who's wearing the pants and who's the decision maker. But the second question I ask is why, especially for first-time buyers, but you'd be surprised how many people are buying in their 50s and 60s, and this question is still very important to them, is why do you think it's a good idea to buy a house? Mm-hmm. And usually the answer is anywhere from I'm tired of paying rent, it's the vanity of it, it's the dream, the American dream of it, and they say that in all kinds of different ways, but rarely do they actually know the real valuable reason of why that's a good idea, even in a market like this. And rarely is it not a good idea for most people. And so, for me, when I shifted to asking that question, I found a few things. Number one, I was really able to educate them in a way that I guarantee you nobody else does. And then number two, they feel that question in a way that they know that I actually have their best interest in mind. I could care less if they end up working with me or not. Thank God I'm in a place where that doesn't matter to me anymore. But what happens is usually people are very drawn to that.
Trust.
It builds trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
You said earlier about this shift that you experienced of going from the external to the internal.
Mm-hmm.
You thought you were going to make less money. In fact, it turned out you made more money, and you kept using the word magnetic, right? It made you more magnetic, and I think that's what you're describing.
Yeah.
And the human resonance can feel somebody who is thinking of the whole picture, thinking of the client, not just you're a transaction, you're a number.
Yeah.
You're going to help me get my name at the top of the next list and all that stuff. And that resonance is magnetic.
It's magnetic, and I think it creates authority.
Yeah, that's fun.
And authority is, I saw this on a video once, but the guy said authority is when a 50-year-old heterosexual man would let another man put his finger up his butt. And he said, and that person is a doctor because he has authority.
That's authority. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
I think in business, one of the things I coach up my guys on, I'm like, listen, you don't have to be in the business for 30 years and be a multimillionaire to have authority.
Right.
You just need to know how to create it. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that you create that is by building relationship, asking questions, and there's definitely some marketing and stuff you could do too. But I think that people who become really great in business and leadership, they carry authority. Mm-hmm. They carry influence. They're not the same word, but they're two words that most true leaders have that aren't just playing it. Like you don't have to necessarily put leadership on your shirt. People just know that is a leader. That person is a leader. And those are two qualities I see in leaders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are so many ways of describing leadership. It's I have a big book. It's Vast Encyclopedia of Leadership. It's this big, and it's all these different, it goes on and on. If you ask anybody what is leadership, you'll get all kinds of different answers. But one of them that I love is the idea that not what is it, but who's a great leader? And they say you can only lead others in this current moment we're in, the degree to which you can lead yourself. Mm-hmm. And it used to be that if you had the title and the uniform and something like that, that might be enough. People would respect that. We say respect the office of the president, mm-hmm. respect the office of the police officer. We respect the uniform. But it's who's wearing the uniform today more and more and more.
Yeah, it is.
So we say the you can lead others to the degree to which you can lead yourself. And what we're talking about here, what I hear you saying, is this idea of falling in love with yourself. Mm-hmm. Being able to care is what allows you to be able to carry the hearts of others.
Yep.
You cannot serve others until you've gotten done serving yourself to some degree.
Yeah.
And that takes time. And I think what you shared was a story of your journey over time learning how to do that. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the calls to being a great leader. Great leaders are not still going after stuff. Mm-hmm. Many of them have stuff. Many of them don't have stuff.
Yep.
But yet they can talk to each other because it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
I'm really grateful for you sharing your story today. And I didn't actually know how close you came to death in that process. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
So there you have another Hard But Worth It podcast. If you enjoyed it, we ask you to like it, to subscribe to it, maybe turn on that bell so you receive notifications, share it with someone. It'll change their life. Chris, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for making the courageous journey. And again, if someone wants to find you on the Money Hole podcast, where are they going to find you? Is that on YouTube?
They can just go to It's Chris Lamm on Instagram or any of the YouTube, Facebook.
How do you spell Lamm?
Lamm. Thank you.
Lamm.
Yeah.
It's Chris Lamm.
It's Chris Lamm. Yeah, they can find everything there.
All right. See you next time.